Everyone, and welcome to Basic Calculus First Time Students. My name is Anflor Cabalda, and I will be your learning partner for this session. We'll have this activity entitled Show What You Know. This activity will require you to enumerate the answers based on the given questions below. You have to write your answers on a piece of paper and you have to take a picture of it for your FA number 2. Number 1, list down the 3 basic techniques that are useful in solving limits, which cannot be done through direct substitution. So, as a clue, you have the word factoring. Okay, so what are the other techniques that you can use for this uh, part or for this number? Second, give at least 2 types of functions which can be solved using direct substitution. And the last one, this is a term used to describe a limit when substituting the x value to the function, both the numerator and the denominator becomes 0. All right, you may take a screenshot of this and you may answer them later. So let's start with our learning objectives. So at the end of the learning episode, all of you are expected to first illustrate continuity of a function at a number. Second, determine whether a function is continuous at a number or not. And third, illustrate continuity of a function on an interval. So you have to familiarize the objectives for today so that you will be guided on what you are going to study and learn for this episode. So stay tuned, guys. Okay, now that you already know our learning objectives for this episode, let's try to have some activities. These activities are geared towards the understanding of each of the learning objectives. So this will help you unlock terms and eventually learn the whole concept. Okay, so this is entitled Do You Know Who I Am? All right, the word here is continuous. Do you know what's the meaning of continuous? Or how do you understand that word? Or what comes into your mind when you read or when you hear the word continuous? Hmm. All right. So there are many synonyms for the word continuous, and some of them are the following: ceaseless, uninterrupted, unbroken, and nonstop. You may have other answers, and that is absolutely okay. But mathematically speaking, what do we really mean by the word continuous? And why is this necessary? Okay, let's try to find out later. All right, so going back, I said let's define it mathematically. To help you with that, let's have the next activity, and that is, can you spot me? All right. What are you going to do? You have to identify which of the following graphs is continuous, or which graph is continuous. So I have here 4 graphs. Okay. You may take a screenshot of this and you have to list down or write the letters of the graphs which you think are continuous. Okay, so let's try to check your answers on the next slide. You have already your answers with you. So again, you are tasked to determine which of the following graphs is continuous or are continuous. Okay, is it A, B, C, or D? If your answers are A and C, congratulations, you are correct. So graph A is a linear function. So obviously this is continuous. The graph is continuous rather. And for graph C, we can also say that the graph is continuous because it is uninterrupted. When you trace it, then there's no break. Okay? So that is continuous. And you may ask, how about graphs B and D? How should we call them, ma'am? All right, let's try to find out. Okay, so we have graphs A and C are continuous, right? Because of their drawing. They are uninterrupted. They are not broken. They do not have breaks. Okay, so how about B and D? All right, graphs B and D are called discontinuous. Discontinuous meaning the prefix dis means not, or these graphs are not continuous. Why? Obviously, for graph B, uh, there are certain points for x which makes the graph uh, discontinuous, right? Meaning there are breaks at some point. When you try to trace it, you cannot trace it smoothly because there are breaks in between them, right? There might be jumps, there might be breaks. Obviously, naagyod, klaro jud kaayo. And we also have graph D. When you try to trace it, you cannot trace it smoothly because at the middle, when x is equal to 1, then there is something wrong here, meaning there is a break in the graph. And uh, graphically speaking, or when you try to inspect this graph, it's very obvious that the graphs are discontinuous. Okay, I hope you understand this part. Okay, let's have our main topic for this episode. We have here continuity at a point. We have two terms here, continuity and a point. Okay, remember this. So let's start with the definition. What is continuity? Sumanday na siya, ma'am. Okay, continuity, it means unbroken curve within the given limit. Okay, you have here the word unbroken. Walay putol, walay na putol. Okay, sana all walay na putol. Charot. In other words, no, in layman's term, if we can draw the given curve without lifting the pen from the paper within the given limits, then the given function is called the continuous function. Otherwise, it is called discontinuous. Okay, so you already have a clue on how to analyze graph. When you try to draw or when you try to trace, no? So may binisaya sa trace. When you try to make subay, ang imong subayon ang graph without lifting the pen, meaning to say, you can trace it smoothly without stopping at some point, then the graph is continuous. Otherwise, if there is a blockage, if there is a break, or there is a hole, then that is called discontinuous. Okay? Opposite ma. Okay? So, let's consider the graph below. Okay? So, we have a linear function, and the labeled point here is x is equal to 1 and y is equal to 2. Okay, we have here. Let us use the graph to check if the function is continuous at x equals 1. Okay, this is um, this is where we should investigate whether the linear function is continuous at x equals 1. So where is our x-axis? So obviously this is our x-axis. Okay, I'll try to highlight this with yellow, the horizontal line here. This is our x-axis. All right, we have here at x equals 1. If you say that x is equal to 1, then we'll have to find out where is 1 from the x-axis, and this is 1, right? So we have here, note that 1 is able to trace the graph from the left side of the number x equals to 1 going to the right side of x equals to 1. Okay, hence we can say that the function is continuous at x equals 1. Now, this is the explanation, but to make it simpler, ang but pasabot daw is, when you try to trace the graph, kung imong subayon ang graph from the left of 1 and from the right of 1, no? And from the left padung sa right ni 1, no? From the left to the right, obviously, kung imo ning subayon, there is no hole. There is no break. Okay? So mean to say the graph is continuous. It's very smooth and it's extending indefinitely. Okay? So, dili ka makaingon nga, oops, inig-trace na ko from left to right. Awa, oh, inig-trace na ko. Smooth kaayo. No? So, klaro gyud kayo that the graph is continuous. And linear function is a continuous function. So, do not forget that. So, how do you do this? You have to locate the value of x, no, on the correct axis, and then you have to trace the graph using a pen or using your hand. If you have traced it smoothly, then the graph is continuous. Okay, so let us consider another graph. Okay, this time we have here a rational function. We have f of x equals 1 over x minus 4. All right, so this is the function. The question is the function continuous at x equals 4? So first step, you have to locate the given point, and that is x equals 4. Again, this is the x-axis. So x equals 4. Obviously, this is 5, so meaning to say this is 4, the green point. Okay. This is 4. All right. So let's try to check. Uh, if we try to inspect this, no, when you try to trace the graph, right? When you try to trace the graph from the left going to 4, do you have a y value? When your x is equal to 4, do you have a y value? Yes or no? And when you try to trace the graph from the right, no, going to 4, do you have a y value? Okay, try to think. Try to investigate with me. All right. So if we trace the graph from the left of x equals 4, that's what I'm saying earlier, from the left of of x equals 4 from the left, obviously the graph shoots down. Asam siya padulong padung ubos, right? It goes downward indefinitely, correct? And while at the right, the graph also shoots up indefinitely. Thus, the function is discontinuous at x equals 4. Claro? Meaning to say, nganong discontinuous man? Because when you try to substitute the value of x to our function, 1 over 4 minus 4, then the function will become undefined. Meaning to say, 4 is our vertical asymptote. So, imo na i-trace din ang dapita. Obviously, the graph cannot pass through 4 because it is an asymptote or it is a boundary. So that is why it is discontinuous. Another is they do not have the same value. Diba? Ang gingon diri, it goes downward padung siya negative infinity, while the other one, it goes to positive infinity. Okay? So I hope you understand this one. We have already investigated the graphs, right? So let's go back. If you trace a graph from left to right and at some point you did not stop, then then the graph is continuous. Okay? Or if at a point or at that certain point the graph is not an asymptote, then it is also considered continuous. Now, the question is, how do we determine if the given functions are continuous or not? This means that, for example, you are just given the function and you're not given the graph. So, pag graph, kailangan mong i-trace, right? Using your hands or using your pen. But if that is a function already, then how do we do it? Okay? We have here, suppose we are not given the graph of a function, but just the function itself. In this case, we have to check it using the 3 conditions. So let's try to remember these. It says here that a function f of x is said to be continuous at x equals c if the following 3 conditions are satisfied. Number 1, f of c exists. We already discussed this on the previous discussions, right? That f of c is a value at the graph, and this is a certain value, right? You don't have to evaluate it from the left and from the right. Okay. Second, the limit of f of x as x approaches to c exist, and f of c, condition 1, is equal to condition 2, the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. If at least one of these conditions is not met, therefore f, or the function, is said to be discontinuous at x equals c, or at that given point. All right? So 3 conditions. Let's try to use this for the following examples. Okay, example 1. Determine if f of x is equal to x cubed plus x squared minus 2 is continuous or not at x equals 1. So we have to check the 3 conditions for continuity of a function. First, f of c. Okay, let's determine if f of c exists. What's the value of c? It's 1, right? At x equals 1. If x is equal to 1, then you have to find f of 1. Okay? Muna pasabot sa f of c. F of 1. It can be changed depending on what is given here or what's given on the problem. And you have to substitute the value of 1 to the given function. So 1 cubed plus 1 squared minus 2. So that's 1 cubed is 1 plus 1 squared is 1 minus 2. Obviously, the answer is 0. Okay? So, may exist, wala. May exist. So, meaning to say, if x is equal to 1, y is 0. So, you have a certain value. So, f of z exists. Check. Second, the limit of f of x as x approaches to c equals the limit of x cubed plus x squared minus 2 as x approaches to 1. Okay. Mom, you said that when we try to evaluate a given limit, now we have to evaluate it from the left and from the right. Yes, that's correct. However, we were also taught, you were also taught rather, or we also knew that when the function is a polynomial function, then meaning to say we can immediately substitute the value of x to the given function. Obviously, this is a polynomial function, so we don't have to use the values, the TOV. We just have to substitute it right away. All right, so we have the same answer. If x is equal to 1, then y is equal to 0. Okay, so the limit of f of x as x approaches to c exists. Exist on 1, exist on 2. Do they have the same value? Yes, they have. It's 0 and 0. So conclusion, f of c, which is f of 1, is equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches to 1. Okay, so same sila. And that is 0, 0. Do not be confused. Kaning f of c, kung pasabot ani, unsay value, unsay y value. Okay, after substituting, after tracing the graph, unsay y value, if you have a given x value na. Okay, so we have checked the 3 conditions and both exist and both are the same value. Therefore, the given function, kaning function, x cubed plus x squared minus 2 is continuous at x equals 1. Okay, so let's have example 2. Determine if f of x equals x minus 3 all over x squared plus x minus 12 is continuous or not at x equals 3. So we have to use the 3 conditions or the continuity test. Number 1, you have to evaluate the function. If x is equal to 3, then when you try to substitute, it becomes what? 0 over 0, meaning to say, when you try to factor this out, the value of x equals 3 is restricted. So, wala siyang 0 over 0. Okay? So, when you try to factor this output, so we have x minus 3, what will be because this is 12, right? So the values or the factors for 12 that will result to x are what? 4 and 3. And since this is positive x, so we have, so my answer, that's 1, it's x minus 3 all over x plus 4 and x minus 3, right? This is you can cancel this. So if x is equal to 3, obviously the limit exists. However, we are trying to find the f of c. So meaning to say, kung f of c gani class, you are not allowed to use the factoring method or any method. Just have to substitute it right away. Magpasabot substitute lang diretso. And when the denominator is 0, meaning to say f of c does not exist or it is undefined. Okay, na undefined man din niya. But for purposes of the conditions, ang giingon dito f of c exists or it does not exist. So we'll use the term does not exist. Anong does not exist? Because the denominator is 0. Meaning to say, if x is equal to 3, there is no y value. Like, what did kayo makitaan sa graph? Okay, meaning to say there is a hole. Ma-cancel ganin ang usa ka factor, meaning to say that value is a hole. So, meaning na ay bali na ay naka-block sa graph. And that is, if x is equal to 3, wala tay answer. Okay? Note that the given function is not defined at 3 since 3 is not in the domain of f. Okay? Klaro kayo. It is not in the domain of f. Hence, the first condition in the definition of a continuous function is not satisfied. Di ba? Ingon to, if anyone, kung naay bisag usa lang sa A or si B, mo fail, meaning automatically the function is discontinuous. Always put the given number. Discontinuous at x equals 3. Okay. Next, let's have example 3. Determine if f of x equals square root of x minus 1 is continuous or not at x equals 4. Obviously, this is a radical function. So, atong balikon, radical function gani, what is the restricted value for x? Or x should be what man? Diba? X should be greater than or equal to 0. So, at some point, mayroon din ka, 4. Is 4 greater than or equal to 0? The answer is yes. So, meaning to say, the value of 4 here, when substituted to our function, will not make the function undefined. So, defined siya. So, pwede. Kung imo siya i-substitute. Okay, using the conditions here, so 4 minus 1 is 3. Square root of 3, it is greater than 0, so f of c exists. Okay, or f of 4 exists. Next, same. Now, because wala man tayo restrictions, and then we can immediately use the direct substitution. Only that, you have to take the limit first. Klaro kayo, limit tanan. Okay, kani nagsugod siyang f of 4. Ang x was replaced with 4. Kani po, you take the limit of the function. Okay, so the answer is square root of 3. Obviously, they have the same value, f of c and the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. Therefore, the function is continuous at x equals 4. Do you understand, class? Okay. Next. Okay, let's have activity. Now, let's try to check your understanding of the things that I have mentioned a while ago. So given the graph on the side, determine if the function f of x is continuous at the following values of x. Number 1, x is equal to -1. Number 2, x is equal to -3. Number 3 is x equals -2. So kung, for example, I wanted to identify this graph, we can say that the graph, this function, or the name of the function is a rational function. Kaya naaman tayo asymptote, no? So, rational function ni. So, kung rational function, continuous ba siya forever? Or naay limitations based on the domain? Let's try to find out. Okay. So let's do the continuity test. Okay. Number 1. If x is equal to -1, okay, let's try to find out x is equal to -1. If this is 0 to the left, this is -1, right? If x is equal to -1, what is our y value? Obviously, that is +1. Kana siya. So, manang answer diri is y equals 1. So, f of c exists. Pwede po nato ilisan f of -1 exists. Kuha? Next, we also have the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. No? The answer here is 1. Let's try to prove. Okay, we have the limit of f of x as x approaches to c from the left. Mo na kung ginaingon. Because we are given the graph, we have to evaluate it from the left and from the right. Okay? Naman na itong number 1. It's -1, sorry. So, from the left, unsa man nga graph atong gamiton? Kaning naa sa quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Kani siya. From the left, obviously, it's approaching, this is approaching this value. And from the right, this is also approaching this y value. So, unsa man nga y value? That is 1. Right? So from the left and from the right, same number. So we can conclude that this limit exists and that is 1. So y equals 1 and this is equal to 1. Therefore, the limit or the function is continuous at x equals -1. Obvious one said when you trace the graph at x equals -1, there is no hole, no break, there's no stopping in your tracing of the graph. Kuha na ni. Again, continuity test. F of c, una. F of c, gani, you just have to substitute it right away. Kung graph, pangitaon nimo asa ang x, pangitaon din nimo ang yang y value. And that is 1. Obviously, kana na siyang point, na siyang first condition. Number 2, you have to evaluate it from the left and from the right kung graph. And if they have the same value, then it exists. And kung mo exist gani ang A and B, same value, continuous. If not, then it's discontinuous. Okay? Next, let's have number 2. If x equals -3, where is -3 here? -1, -2. This is -3, right? The one and the violet. If x equals to -3, what's our y value? The answer is negative 1 because at the y value, this is negative 1. Right? So, f of c exists. Okay, pwede na naman mo ilisan og f of negative 3 exists. It's fine. Okay, basta number 1, direct substitution. Or, try to look at the graph. No? I-plot usa, i-locate usa kung asa si x, asa nga direction. Left side ba or right side? Okay, and find the y value. Always, ang atong gipangita diri is ang y value to make it an ordered pair. Next, the limit of f of x as x approaches to c is negative 1. Oh, you have here. No? From the left, kani nga graph, kani, oh, and kani nga graph. Okay, obviously, they are approaching the same value, and that is negative 1. So, f of c equals the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. Therefore, the function is continuous in anit kasagaran ang buhaton nga conclusion. The function is continuous at x equals negative 3. Always include the given point. Okay, mayon ka, the function is continuous. Unsa man. It's very general. So you have to specify. Kaya ang atong topic ba is continuity at a point or at continuity at a given number. Okay? So gihatagan man tag certain number, we have to include that in our conclusion. Next. Let's have question number 3. If x is equal to negative 2, okay, number 3 na ta, negative 2. This is negative 1, this is negative 2, kaning black. Okay, negative 2. Try to use the f of c. If x equals negative 2, di ba mo na itong negative 2, kaning black. Pila may y value ani? Obviously, this is 0. So, nag-exist? Wala. Exist. Klaro kayo kay solid circle. So, naa siya. F of negative 2 is 0. Exist. Next. The limit of f of x as x approaches to c. The answer here is does not exist. Let's try to find out. This is x is equal to negative 2. So, from the left, okay, for number 3, there is no graph available. No? What do I mean by this? The graph does not pass through x equals negative 2 because this is an asymptote. We have an asymptote here, a boundary. So meaning to say, there is no graph available because the graph cannot pass through this asymptote. It does not exist. Kung ato gid siyang i-evaluate from the left, kung ato siyang subayon ba from the left, gikan sa wala, padung nito, this one, try to use a pen, try to trace it, going to 2 from the left, going to negative 2 from the left, the graph shoots down. No? So the answer din ang left is negative infinity. Ang right side board, it goes up. So it's positive infinity. Obviously, they have different values. So, it does not exist. So, kay di man sila pareho, 0 man ang f of c, ang limit kay does not exist. So, obviously, they are not equal, and the graph or the function is discontinuous at x equals negative 2. You have to write all the continuity test. No, mga parts niya. Dili pwede nga, ay ma'am, obvious naman nga ang 1 ug 2 kay kanang dili pareho value. So you have to list it down as your proof, no, for your claim. Kaya mo man na siya. Dili siya matawag nga continuity test if 1 lang imong gisuwat, 2 lang imong gisuwat, or nga ni 3 pero walay not equal, walay equal, and walay conclusion. Di siya matawag nga valid. Okay? Klaro man sad sa graph, maski kanang nanakay kludaan ba? Di sa graph, x equals negative 2. Hala, putol man ang graph, oh. This is an asymptote, meaning to say, na naka-answer daan nga, discontinuous siya. And how are you going to prove that? Use the continuity test. Okay? Okay, now note din if one of the conditions fail, no, then the function is not continuous. Okay? Asa man sila ni fail? Sa third. Sa third sila ni fail because it is not equal. Dapat check ang dinhi sa first, check pud ang sa second, and they have to be the same value. Pag dili, one of the conditions fail man, fail which is number 3, meaning to say discontinuous. So, ano siya ang proof mathematically. Ang kani, analyzing graph, which is gamit gyapon katong tracing. Okay? Okay. So we have the second activity. We have determine if the following functions are continuous at the given value of x. Show your complete solution using the three conditions of continuity. Number 1, f of x equals 2x squared plus x minus 1 at x equals 1. So for this part, we don't have a graph. So we have to use the continuity test. So we have for number 1, if x is equal to 1, then y is equal to 2. So f of c exists. What's the solution? You have to substitute the value of 1 to the given function. And the answer is 2. Next, we have to evaluate the function, the limit of the function at x equals 1. So this is a polynomial function. So kung polynomial function, you need to say it's safe to substitute right away the given value of x. So we have the same solution, and that is equal to 2. And number 3, f of c exists, and the value is equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. So pareho man sila, 2 equals 2. Therefore, the function f of x, nani siya function dira. Therefore, f of x, the function f of x equals, nani function guys ha? The function f of x equals 2x squared plus x minus 1 is continuous at x equals 1. Okay? So we have function number 2. Using the f of c test, okay, number 1, if x equals 1, so y equals 3. Solution, substitute lang, 4 times 1 squared minus 1, that's 4 minus 1 is 3. So, nag-exist. Next, we still have a polynomial function, right? The highest power is 2. You can also say that is a quadratic function. Okay? So, we can immediately use direct substitution, and that is 3. So, we have equal value 3 and 3. So, manas lang equal sila sa number 3 condition. So, we can say that the function f of x equals 4x squared minus 1 is continuous at x equals 1. Alright? And we have number 3. F of x equals square root of x minus 3 at x equals 1. Let's do the continuity test. Number 1, we have if f of x or f of c equals 1, so if x equals 1, then y equals square root of negative 2. So f of c does not exist because we cannot have a negative radicand or a negative number inside the radical sign. So bawal siya. So the domain dire, it must be greater than or equal to 0. Negative 2 is less than 0. So it does not exist. So, klaro kaayo, condition 1, fail na siya. So, this is a discontinuous function. Negative 2 is not a real number. We also have Imo jud ipadayon og solve, square root of x minus 3, the limit of the square root of x minus 3 is x approaches to c, it does not exist. The radicand must be greater than or equal to 0. When you try to evaluate it, same solution because the denominator is 1. Sa function ba? Dili ba siya mahimong 0, so you can immediately use direct substitution. Only that, the answer is negative 2. Kuma na siya. And condition 3, f of c is not equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. Therefore, the given function is discontinuous at x equals 1. Let's be clear. When it's not continuous, you put discontinuous. Okay, para klaro na. It's continuous or discontinuous. At that given point, at x equals 1. Okay, review ta. F of c dapat mo exist. Pag f of c, automatic, i-substitute kung function ang given. If graph ang given, you have to locate first kung asa ang value ni x, asa nga axis, negative ba or positive. And then you look for the y value. And for the limit naman, kung function ang gihatag, you have to check if unsa nga klase nga function ang naa. Polynomial ba, radical ba, rational, quadratic, trigonometric, or unsa pa. Then you have to determine if naay restriction. No? If naa, then obviously it is a discontinuous because the value of the first and the second conditions are not equal naman. But you have to write down the 3 conditions as proof of your understanding of the continuity test. Okay, and for the graph, for limit, you have to evaluate the graph, trace the graph from the left, no, and from the right, going to that certain point sa x-axis. Okay, so I hope klaro ni siya dinhi. Repita. Naapa mo, no? So we have one example. This time around, we'll talk about piecewise function. So we have a piecewise function. Again, a piecewise function is composed of a function and a condition. Okay, kung wala if na nakabutang niya nga semicolon, meaning to say it's a condition. We have to evaluate now if the piecewise function is continuous at x equals 4. Okay, but there's a tricky part here is that you don't have to substitute it right away to both functions because we have 2 different conditions. The first is x is less than 4. The second is x is greater than or equal to 4. So obviously, dili pwede nga diretso because you have 2 different functions. So, evaluate x is equal to 4. Asa man nga function na imong substitutan sa 4? Is it the first or the second? Kung first, less than 4 daw ang condition. Na x equals to 4 man. So, arit sa second. And this is correct. So, f of c. So f of c, ato i-substitute ang x equals 4 to this function, to the second function. Dili sa first because less than man. Ang gibutang diri is equal man. Less than and equal are not the same. So, ari ka sa second condition and use the second function. So, we have the solution. Asan niya substitute? Sa second function. The quantity of x minus 4 squared plus 3. Then you have to substitute the value of 4 and simplify. The answer is 3. Next, we have here the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. The answer is does not exist. Ngano kaha? You're from the right, no? When you say from the right, you have to focus on the values that are greater than 4. Diba? Pumahimot tag number line. Okay, maingon tag 4 ni. values to the right, values to the right of 4 are greater than 4, right? So, asa man ka mag-substitute? Of course, kani nga condition. X is greater than or equal to 4. Kani nga condition, function ang gamiton. Di ka mag-substitute. So, the answer is 3. So, from the left, ang imong gamiton pod ang less than because from the left pod of 4, the x values are less than 4. Klaro man, this is 3, this is 2, this is 1, padong negative. So, values are less than 4. So, asay gamiton nga function ang first function at to ka mag-substitute. So, 4 plus 1 is 5. So, maunang does not exist because 3 and 4 are not equal. This limit does not exist. So, gamit gid kayo ang previous topics. I hope inyo tong digest. No, kaya nagbalik-balik kay gani siya ang topic. So, number 3, f of c is not equal to the limit of f of x as s approaches to c. Therefore, the function f of x is discontinuous at x equals 4. Always include the conclusion and the certain point or a certain number. Again, pag piecewise function, you have to evaluate it based on the given. Kung equal to 4, pangitaa kung asa equal to 4. Pag equal to 4, pangitaa kung ang less than. For example, ang nabutang diri is for this case, x is greater than 4 lang ni. Na nakabutang diri x, example lang niya, x equals 4. And the answer is 1. Okay? Always remember that ang kanig na adin nga side, kaning first, kaning sa function nga side, mo na ito ang y value. Everyone. So, meaning to say, kung imo siyang i-substitute, ang value sa x, ang gawas ani, kani sa function, di ba kay y? So, for example, makakita mo din ani nga case, x is equal to 4. If x is equal to 4, automatically, based aning given, y is equal to 1. So, di na ka mag-substitute. Example lang. For example, kani, wala equal diri na dini. So, ang imong answer din sa number 1, 1 na. Di na ka mag-substitute. That is, if kani ang given. Pero kung kani ang given, obviously, mag-substitute yun ka. Kaya dili pa man define ang function. Kani kay given naman. Ha? I hope klaro ni nga part din eh. Okay? So, walang i-reason, kaya di man siya mao ang main topic. Okay? From the left, nga from the left and from the right man ka, ma'am. Obviously, because I have two different conditions. One is from the left and one is from the right. Ang atong balikon, ang kaning nga part, dapat baya nga same silang value. Kaya dili sa same value does not exist. And one of the conditions is not met, meaning fail siya, discontinuous at the given point, which is x equals 4. Okay, I hope okay pa mo din ha, no? So, pa naglibog, wala pa na confuse, wala pa ni surrender, no? Mindset na to. I can do this, no? But sa mo appeal in prayer, God, help me learn this topic. So, pwede gid kaya na. So, we are already done with continuity at a point. Karon na sad, continuity at an interval. So, kung hindi ang interval, na ay lower limit, na ay upper limit. Okay? Natay words nga from o to. Interval or na ay range. Range of values. Kaganina is exact man ang value. Sa x karon, range na siya. From, for example, from 1 to 2. Okay? So, let's try to learn this together. So we'll have the lesson recap. Itong i-recap. Pagbabalik tanaw. Okay, meaning of continuity. A function is continuous if its graph has no holes or breaks in it. Okay, holes. No? Kung baktas ka, o nay buslot din ha, napita, di ka kabaktas og straight, kay, muli ko manyud ka. Right? So, muna siyang application sa continuous functions. Right? For example, the road. Kung nay block sa road, nig-agi nimo, may naman dito, just use the other lane. Correct? So, nay block, nay blockage, nay hole, nay break, nay interruption. Discontinuous. Pero kung wala, then it's continuous. Kay no holes and no breaks. Continuous siya. Next, a discontinuous function is a function where either the function is not defined at a point or the left-hand limit, katong from the left, dili siya defined, or from the right, dili siya defined. Pwede po siya defined, sito to sa define, kanang naay value, say for example, katong sa piecewise, naay value, you have 3 and 5, but dili sila equal. Okay? So, the limit does not exist at a given point. So, mo to itong mga examples kanina. Okay? And we have the very basic continuity test. This test is used whenever you're given only a function and no graph. Okay, you have to write down the 3 conditions. Okay, even if it's obvious, and you fail siya sa number 1 or you fail siya sa number 2, when you don't reach the 3rd step and the conclusion, your whole answer is incorrect or it is wrong. Okay, continuity test, f of c, automatic na i-substitute. Dapat exist siya or defined siya. Next, the limit of f of x as x approaches to c. Again, you have to evaluate it graphically kung graph ang yatag or mathematically. Okay, from the left and from the right. Pag piecewise, tanawa kung asa na condition mo fall ang given number, and then if di na siya ni fall sa greater than, katong corresponding function mo ay imong substitutan. Dili pud ka magpataka. Okay? Very important note. If one of the conditions fail, then the function is discontinuous at a given point. Dili ani ang kanang summary or ang imong therefore dapat nakabutang ni diri at x equals 1 for purposes of siya explanation at a given point. Okay, I hope the first topic, continuity on at a point, is clear na. You may hit the rewind button so that you can learn this topic. Okay, so let's try to remember this. A function can be continuous on an interval. Again, interval on a given range. Okay, so composed here of several numbers. Pwede siya definite, pwede po siya indefinite. Definite meaning, klaro kayo maihap nimo kung pila ang numbers involved from the lower limit up to the upper limit. Okay? A function kuno is said to be continuous on an interval when the function is defined at every point on that interval and undergoes no interruptions. Klaro kayo? No interruptions, no jumps or breaks. If some function f of x satisfies these criteria, from x equals a to x equals b, mo ang interval, for example, we say that f of x is continuous on the interval a, b. A to b. So, mo ni siya ang mathematical definition. Let's try to dissect this one. Alright. So here are the given concepts which are important in determining whether a function is continuous at the endpoints of closed intervals. Okay, we have one-sided continuity. A function is said continuous from the left if f of c equals sa limit sa function as x approaches c from the left. Kaning c nga nasa na negative sa ibaba from the left na dili na siya c negative. Natay mga one-sided. For example, kani, i-evaluate lang nimo from the left, equal ba sila or dili? Pwede na. Okay? Ang gitawag ana is one-sided continuity. Or from the right, labakang imong gina-specify sa problem. Determine if the function is continuous at x equals 1 from the left. So, i-substitute nimo continuity test f of 1 kung na-exist, butang. Then, number 2, from the right raman, obviously, from the right lang imong gamiton. Kung na piecewise pa, ang condition nga greater than, mura imong substitutan. Dili kaya ang tanan. Okay? One-sided continuity. Next, let's have known facts. Okay? Continuity of polynomial, absolute, rational, and square root functions. So these are algebraic functions, diba? Letter A, very important. Polynomial functions are continuous everywhere. Okay? Mapa-constant function, no? Mapa-linear function, mapa-quadratic, mapa-cubic, ano pa nang tawag ana nga function as long as it's a polynomial function, automatically continuous silang tanan. Next, the absolute value function is also continuous everywhere. Okay, so may dagway anang kaniya polynomial function, it depends. It can be a constant, lang straight lang, a linear, quadratic, cubic function, and so on. So, bisag unsa pa na din na, obviously, pag drawing na ko, walay putol, walay break, wa tanan, smooth lang, continuous. Absolute value, katong murag letter V. In anang dagway niya. Rational functions are continuous on their respective domains, meaning to say, continuous siya kung walay makapa-zero sa denominator. So, pwede all real numbers kung dili siya zero inig-substitute. Pero kung zero siya, di na tamag ka problema. Or, shall I say, ma-discontinuous ang graph at that certain point. Sa square root code, obviously, it's continuous on 0, diba? Greater than or equal to 0, dapat ang sulod diri or ang radicand. Padong positive infinity. Positive infinity because these are values greater than 0. We cannot list down all of them because they are way too many. So, mo ni siya ang gamiton positive infinity. Unsa to? Polynomial functions, continuous. Absolute functions, continuous. Unsa may na restriction, ang rational ug ang square root. Ang rational, dili pwede ang denominator mahimong 0. Ang square root function, dili pwede ang radicand, the function inside the function, the function inside the radical sign is not negative. Negative ray kontra ni mo ani. Kani 0, rational, kani negative ang radical sign. Or ang radicand, sorry. Okay, so I hope you're still with me. Example 1. Consider the graph of a function f given on the side and determine if the function f is continuous in the following intervals. Muna kung pasabot sa interval. No? From negative 2 and 2. Okay, from negative infinity and 0. From 0 to positive infinity. So, muna siya interval. Kaganina, continuity at a point man, at a point or at a given number. Kani, at an interval. So, a little exciting na ni siya ang continuity at an interval. Okay, we have a graph on the side. So, kani ko nga graph, ato daw i-determine kung continuous man siya, ba siya at an even interval. Okay. So, we have number 1, negative 2 to 2. Okay. I cannot zoom it. So, I just have negative 2. No? This one. Ano bang yellow, guys? Okay. This is red. Oh, okay, this one. We have from negative 2 until positive 2. Now, these are your x values, right? X-axis. Negative 2 to positive 2. You have to determine if the graph ba kuno is continuous from negative 2 to positive 2. Or when you try to trace it, there are no breaks, no holes, no jumps. Okay? So meaning to say, after tracing it from the left and from the right, it's continuous. Okay? Kung graph ang atua, gamiton. We also have this, number 2. From negative infinity to 0. Asa man ang negative infinity, ma'am? Negative infinity. Kini. Negative infinity. Kani siya. Negative infinity and 0. So, what's the answer? If you trace the graph from negative infinity to the left of 0, siya 0. So, there's 0. From the left of 0 kuno pag kaning area dire, we will not lift our pen padulong 0. This is continuous, still continuous. Again, if you trace the graph from the negative infinity to the left side, negative infinity to the left side of 0, we will not lift our pen. Smooth kayang curve. Negative, kay negative man rin mga value sa y. Negative padulong 0. X padulong 0. So that is continuous. Next, number 3. From 0 to positive infinity. For the interval 0 and positive infinity, you trace the graph from the right side of 0. Okay, positive infinity man ang partner dire. Adto daw ta mag-trace sa graph from the right. So this one is from the right of 0. Ba mo ni? Okay. Example mo ni siya, right? If x is equal to 0, y is equal to 4. Something like that. Kung yung siyang i-approach from the right, kani. I'm not lifting my pen. From the left, pod. Oh, we are approaching the same value. So I mean to say this is continuous. Okay, consider the graph the pod. Okay, it's all right. So we have here a function 1 all over x minus 4. Determine if the function is continuous on the following intervals. Number 1, from negative 3 to positive 2. So we have in here 1, 2, 3 sa left side. Set it. So meaning to say from this point, negative 3 pa doon dito. Kung makatrace kasi yung graph, without hose or brakes. And to say it's continuous. Klaro man sad because the graph is very, very smooth. Ni-shoot down ng galing. How 0 is 0 to 4. Kani 0 to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 4. We have the y value. It's somewhere here. Right? From 0 down to 4. Tracing na to. Naputol wala. Trace. Putol wala. So meaning to say, this is continuous. Number 5. 0 to 5 na naman. 0 to 5. This is 5, right? 0 to 5. 0 to 5. Oo, nagpadong na ko ni 5 pack. Padong na ko. Kung tama na color. Padong ko ni 5. But wala nga nag-connect na mo doon. So I'll shoot down. So this is this continuous. 5 padong positive infinity. 5 positive infinity. So kaning graph na gamiton. From 5 kaning 5 kani padong to positive infinity lang. Therefore it's continuous. Negative 5 to 8. Negative 5 padong ni 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. Ano 8 is 10, 9, 8. So, gikan sa negative 5, which is this, padung daw ko ni positive 8. Is the graph continuous or not? Obviously, dili gyud kay mo sa shoot down. Mo sa constant. How about 2 and 7? 2. Padung ni 7. Still, it does not exist. Kaya man tayo graph din eh. So this is the explanation. You can take a screenshot of this so that you may study this later. Okay. We just look at the function corresponding to the interval specified 0, 1, 0, 1. Kani, less than or equal to 0? No. Number 2, x is less than or equal to 0. 0, but greater than or equal to 1. Kani, this is 1, this is 4. Wala kay 0, 1. Greater than 4, 0, 1. So, obviously, the answer is 3. Kaya mo, pareho na akong isulti. Given ang condition, ang dinhi na area sa y value, given na na 3 ang iyang answer. So, you don't have to explain that, kaya naman na. Okay. So, asa man siya mo, ang naka-tricky gamay sa piecewise function is that mamili ka asay mas fitting, mas sakto nga function kada given condition. So the G is continuous at 0, 1. For x equals greater than 4, the corresponding piece of G is G of x equals x minus 3, which is a polynomial function. Okay, naman tayo, 4 to positive infinity. So 4 to positive infinity meaning 4 padulo positive infinity. So, kung mayroon tag greater than 4, because of this, 4 to positive infinity is 4 greater than 4, so kani. So, kung imong i-investigate, what type of function is this? Oh, this is a polynomial function. So, kay polynomial function is continuous everywhere. Therefore, the function is continuous for all x such that x is 4 to positive infinity. Okay, so we have an activity here. Determine if continuous ba ang each of the function on the given intervals a, b, c, and d. Let's dissect a. So, for purposes of explanation, I try to graph this function, the x cubed, k cubed. Now, this is a cubic function, so muna siya murag S ang form. Okay, so let's have the solution. The given function for a letter A is a polynomial function. Obviously, this is a polynomial function, so we can immediately conclude that it is continuous at -4 and 4 and 0 and 9. Okay? Polynomial function, no need to expand. But if you are not contented of the explanation, I can show you the graph to prove that from -4 to 4, we have here -4. So, ang graph kini, from -4 padulong +4, tanawang +4 din yung area. Total kay naputol man eh. Kung imo siya isubay, actually taas pa na siya dito para maabot hantod magtapad ni ang kaning 4 din na utod to. So mas taas pa gid ni. Only that iputol na ako because it extends indefinitely. It's very difficult to cut it. Okay, so klaro na kayo. Next, continuous. Next, continuous. We also have the next topic. Our next function, 3 all over x minus 2. So we have 5 and 10. 5, now there is 5 and 10. So it's continuous. 5, 10. 5, ba mo ng 5, kaning area dere. So from here, padung daw ko ni 10. Trace na to, smooth, continuous. Okay? How about number 2? From -4, kani, -4 ni, padung 10. Kani, klaro kayo. -4 padung 10. This shoots down and this shoots up. We cannot meet halfway. So, unsa may restriction ani, x should not be equal to 2. Na sa given interval, asa man si 2 na belong sa 5 and 10 or sa 4, -4 and 10. Obviously, it's on the second part. So, na belong si 2 din na makapa-undefined sa function. Therefore, it is discontinuous at -4 and 10. Continuous at 5 and 10. Next, we also have the absolute value. So, manindag sa absolute value. Again, natin premise ko ganina that all polynomial and absolute value functions are continuous everywhere. So, conclude yun that it is continuous at positive 1, 1, and 0 to positive infinity. So, kani, 0 man eh. Ito lang positive infinity. Diba? Smooth. Negative 1. And 0 to positive infinity na. Smooth man kayo na wala may break. And so this is continuous as well. And we also have this. The square root of the function. Square root function half lagi ng drawing. Okay? Ito yung substitute. So may makapa-undefined ani. So equate this one to 0. So that will be 3x equals 1 divided by 3 divided by 3. So x should not have negative 3. Okay. So to evaluate. So bawal ang 1/3. Ito evaluate na yung 1/3 diri sa interval. 1/3, that's 0 point something. 0.33333. So from 1 to 10, klaro man siguro kayong graph, guys. So 1 from this side, padulong ni 10, which is this side. Obviously, kung ako i-trace, that is a smooth curve without breaks, without holes, without interruption. So this is continuous. So from here, we have positive value 1/3. Asa man ang 1/3? Na belongs sa second condition. Kaya maagian man ang 1/3. From negative 1, obviously, diri ang negative 1. Matabok siya og positive infinity. 1 cannot pass through it because the count has been locked. So 1 din he, adong negative infinity results. Okay, I think this will be the end of our discussion for the 3 learning objectives. Okay, I hope you have learned something from our discussion. Thank you so much. God bless.